Can a campfire change the way you play Pathfinder? With a Campfire Chronicler, the answer is absolutely yes. And by the end of the video, you'll see why. What if a single archetype, one you might have overlooked, could turn your entire character into the heart of the party? Not just in combat, but around the firelight after. That's exactly what the Campfire Chronicler dedication does. And in today's build, the Storywood Campfire Sage, we're going to see how it combines with druid magic, familiars, and companions to create a character who heals, protects, inspires, and tells stories that literally shape the game. Welcome to Ctrl+Alt+Build, where we control the dice, alt the meta, and build the legend. I deep dive into Pathfinder 2e character builds, sometimes born from random rolls, sometimes built around a specific or brand new option, always with the goal of making something thematic, fun, and table ready. If you love experimenting with archetypes, discovering sneaky powerful feats, or finding fresh inspiration for your next character, you're in the right place. Grab a seat by the fire, because I'm glad you're here. So, let's spark this story from the very beginning. We'll start at level 1, where the Sage takes their first steps into a brand new life cycle. Freshly reborn, ready to gather tales, and already carrying the seeds of the Campfire Chronicler within them. The Storywood Campfire Sage begins life, literally, anew. As a ghoran, their entire existence exists on a cycle, with only a couple of decades to make their mark before fading back into the soil. This particular sprouting emerged with a vow, to use this short span, not in quiet solitude, but to travel, collect the stories of others, and share them around the campfires of forest paths and town squares alike. Every scar on bark, every whispered tale in the market, and every myth told beneath the stars becomes fuel for the Sage's ever-growing narrative tapestry. Mechanically, the attribute spread reflects this dual commitment to magic and social presence. Wisdom starts high at a +4, because primal druidic spellcasting demands sharp perception and spiritual grounding. Dexterity and constitution rise next to ensure survival. A sage wandering into strange forests or hostile towns must be nimble and durable. Finally, a point in charisma acknowledges the importance of voice and presence. Storytelling isn't just flavor here, it's baked into the mechanical design as a secondary strength. At level 1, the Sage's skill proficiencies paint the picture of a wide-ranging learner. Acrobatics, arcana, crafting, diplomacy, ghoran lore, plant lore, nature, performance, and stealth are all trained. This isn't a focused specialist, it's someone who can dabble in anything, echoing their role as a collector of other people's experiences. In play, this means the Sage can participate in nearly any skill check seen. Maybe they aren't leading a stealth mission or crafting siege engines, but they're always able to contribute, often surprising the party with unexpected competence. The first set of feats locks in the Sage's theme. Ghoran lore ties them to their heritage, allowing them to recall stories of their people. Voice of Nature, Plant Empathy, opens conversations with plants, a powerful thematic anchor and surprisingly flexible in play. Ever wonder what the hedges in the noble's courtyard might have overheard? Or what the roots beneath the battlefield remember? With this, the Sage knows. Finally, the Leaf Order sets their druidic path. Leaf druids gain healing focus, sustainable spellcasting, and a tie to plant magic that synergizes perfectly with the Sage's theme. The Leaf Order's focus spell, Cornucopia, provides food and sustenance in a way that makes every campfire a shared ritual and grants a small amount of healing. For spells, the choices lean hard into plant magic and supportive play. Bramblebush and Tanglevine give the Sage tools for battlefield control right from the start. They aren't just do damage spells, they hinder enemies, create zones of danger, and reward tactical thinking. Root reading is perfect for exploration, letting the Sage commune with the earth to divine information. On the support side, Healing Plaster gives unlimited out-of-combat healing via cantrip, and Stabilize ensures that fallen allies won't bleed out while the Sage tells their final tale. Their first level spell picks are equally on brand. Flourishing Flora conjures blossoms for offense and defense, and Heal is a cornerstone utility spell every druid should carry. Cinematically, imagine the opening session. The Sage walks with a tiny leshy familiar perched on their shoulder, its leafy body curling close like a listening child. They pause beneath a great oak, lay a hand against its bark, and murmur in a language only the plants hear. Then, with a soft smile, they turn back to the party. The oak remembers many things. It says you shouldn't step in the clearing ahead. It reeks of blood. Moments later, when battle does come, the sage waves a hand and thorny brambles erupt at their enemy's feet, while their leshy companion scampers off to deliver a healing plaster to a wounded fighter. Alternative options exist even here. Ancient Memories, for example, could replace ghoran lore, granting a flexible way to swap trained skills later. Mechanically, it might be stronger, but lore is the lifeblood of this build. The choice of ghoran lore doubles down on the theme that knowledge comes from heritage, history, and connection to one's people. The power curve can come later. Level 1 is about anchoring identity. At this stage, the sage is not flashy. They don't swing heavy weapons or rain down firestorms. Instead, they're an endless well of little advantages. Battlefield hindrance, out of combat sustain, consistent healing, a diplomatic voice, and a unique way to gather information. And, because they're ghoran, every action is underpinned with urgency. This sage only has 20 years of life before the body withers, and every new story must be heard before that clock runs out. As the sage journeys further from their birthplace, they discover a new source of power, not in magic, but in companionship. Nights on the road begin to form a rhythm. Gather wood, strike a flame, sit close to allies and strangers alike, and share what had been learned on that day. The fire becomes more than a warmth. It is a crucible for memory, a stage for storytelling, and a way to bind a wandering party into something that feels more like family. By second level, the Campfire Sage doesn't just collect stories, they curate them, shaping the bonds of the party itself. Mechanically, this moment is where the build's archetype core comes online. Through the free archetype rules, the Sage takes the Campfire Chronicler dedication, and this decision defines the rest of the journey. It transforms downtime into roleplay opportunities, bolsters social interaction, and provides a unique thematic spine that few parties will expect. Many archetypes boost damage or defense, but this one enhances the connective tissue between allies, fitting perfectly for a sage whose very concept is to wander, gather, and share. Alongside this dedication, the druid's familiar grows stronger through enhanced familiar. With this feat, the sage expands on the leshy's abilities, granting up to 4 familiar abilities instead of 2. The choices here lean on versatility. Restorative Familiar allows the leshy to deliver additional healing. Snoop aids with scouting and perception. Plant ties them thematically to the sage's own nature. And Ambassador bolsters social checks. Already the familiar is becoming more than a flavor piece. It's a mechanical extension of the sage's many roles. Later, Verdant Burst and Spell Delivery will be added, but even at this stage, the familiar provides flexibility few other than druids can match. Skills continue to grow as well. By training in religion and survival, the sage deepens their grounding to the world. Religion gives them better insight into divine matters and lore-driven stories, while survival ensures they can navigate wilderness travel, forage food, and read the signs of the land. Together, these reinforce the narrative of a character who listens not only to the people, but also to spirits in the world itself. For a skill feat, the sage picks up Dubious Knowledge. This one is mechanically fascinating. When a recall check fails, they still get some information, though some of it may be incorrect. For a standard adventurer, this could be risky, but for a storyteller, it's perfect. Every tale, after all, is part truth and part embellishment. Around the table, this can lead to great roleplay. I heard that trolls hate fire. Oh, and I also once heard they're weak to singing. Probably one of those is right. It makes the sage's role in recall knowledge checks feel authentic to the campfire motive. Stories are rarely 100% accurate, but they're almost always useful. The spell list also expands, this time with a more aggressive option, Pummeling Rubble. While not a fireball tier damage spell, it is an excellent early game area attack that ties thematically into a druidic earth magic. The sage doesn't just control terrain now, they can punish enemies with stones and debris. In a party role context, this nudges their blaster score upward while still staying firmly rooted in natural magic. Alternative options at this stage could include terrain-focused feats like Terrain Expertise, which improve survival and give bonuses in specific biomes. That would suit a more exploration-heavy table, but Dubious Knowledge was chosen instead because it reinforces the idea that every encounter, every tale, every bardic whisper the sage picks up becomes ammunition, even if it's only half right. The trade-off is worth it. Flavor and theme take the lead, while raw mechanics stay just behind. Cinematically, this level's turning point often happens around a literal campfire. Picture a night's rest interrupted by bandits. As they move in to threaten the party, the sage doesn't panic. Instead, they sit calmly, voice rising over the crackling fire. Do you know the story of the apple tree? It told me once that thieves are always hungry, but never satisfied. As the bandits hesitate, stone rises from the ground and pummels their ranks, knocking a few aside. When the fight ends, the sage returns to the firelight, continuing the tale as though nothing had ever happened. From a party role perspective, this level cements the sage as more than a healer. They're also a face, leveraging diplomacy lore and storytelling to anchor social scenes. They're a support, with a familiar who can scout, deliver magic, or serve as an ambassador in tricky negotiations. And they're edging towards Blaster, picking up druidic control and damage options that help the party in combat. The Campfire Chronicler dedication in particular is worth calling out. Many tables may never see this archetype in play, but here it becomes the heart of the build. By turning downtime, travel, and campfires into roleplay pillars, the Sage becomes not just a mechanical contributor, but also the narrative glue that helps hold the party together. That's the hidden strength of this design. It makes everyone else's story shine brighter. By their third year of wandering, the Storywood Campfire Sage has begun to weave a patchwork of knowledge from every voice they've heard. They don't just study, they collect. Every village elder's proverb, every hunter's boast, every spirit's whisper is cataloged and filed away in their mind. When a challenge arises, the sage's first instinct isn't to rely on formal training, it's to recall what someone once said around a campfire. I remember hearing from a willow how to set this kind of snare. Or, didn't a shepherd once tell me about this disease? Even when they've never been directly taught, they can improvise, bluff, or adapt with the confidence of someone who has heard the story before. Mechanically, this growth is captured beautifully through the feat Untrained Improvisation. This general feat boosts the effectiveness of all skills in which the sage is untrained, allowing them to roll as if they had at least some basic familiarity. Thematically, it's perfect. The sage may not have studied engineering, medicine, or thievery formally, but stories and secondhand lessons let them step into the spaces and contribute. At the table, this means the player will rarely say, "Sorry, I can't help with that." Instead, they lean in with a, "Let me try. I once heard a tale." In terms of skill advancement, nature climbs to expert proficiency. This is both a practical and thematic decision. On the mechanical side, an expert nature skill strengthens recall knowledge against creatures of the wild, boosts survival-like checks tied to plants and animals, and improves spell DCs for primal magic. On the narrative side, it emphasizes that the sage's connection to the natural world isn't shallow. It deepens with each step. They're not just listening to the trees anymore, they're learning from them. Second-ranked spells also arrive at this level, and the sage's selections double down on the storyteller theme. Voice of the Breeze is an elegant utility spell that allows messages to travel across distances as though whispered by the wind. In play, this can be used to convert communication, long-distance coordination, or even dramatic flair. Imagine allies hearing the sage's voice drift across the battlefield, guiding them like a narrator. Helpful Wood Spirits expands the support role, summoning small nature spirits that can aid in tasks or bolster allies. These aren't just spells, they're moments of folklore, the kind of magic that feels like it's been plucked directly out of a fireside legend. Cinematically, level 3 often manifests in small surprises. The party may be dealing with a locked chest and the rogue fails to pick it. The sage chuckles, kneels down, and mutters, "I once heard from a tinkerer that these old locks jam if you put pressure on the hinge." With untrained improvisation, while not able to attempt skill actions with these skills, they are less likely to critically fail in the wrong moment. Or perhaps they call upon helpful wood spirits to lift a heavy beam, describing the aid as spirits of the forest lending their hands. Every action reinforces that their strength doesn't come from personal mastery, but from stories borrowed and retold. The build here could have leaned on sturdier mechanical options. Many players at this stage pick up feats like toughness or combat-focused general feats to pad defenses. These are undeniably powerful. But the Campfire Sage isn't about brute force. It's about flexibility, adaptability, and theme. By taking untrained improvisation, they align the mechanics to the roleplay vision, ensuring that when the party needs a jack of all trades, the Sage is ready. This shift also expands their party role ratings. As a solver, they now score higher thanks to their ability to meaningfully contribute across nearly all skill checks. That complements their existing face and healer roles, ensuring that out of combat, the Sage is rarely idled. In combat, their new spells give them stronger support tools, as both helpful wood spirits and voice on the breeze create tactical advantages. It's also important to note how the familiar continues to shine here. With enhanced familiar already online and more abilities to come, the Sage can use their Leshy companion to supplement these improvisational moments. The Leshy might deliver a spell, scout an area, or simply echo the Sage's stories in a tiny voice, turning every campfire scene into a duet. Around the campfire itself, level 3 brings a shift in how allies perceive the Sage. They're no longer just a quirky plant with healing spells, they're becoming the glue of the group. Need someone to talk down a hostile villager? The Sage spins a tale. Need someone to patch up a broken cartwheel? The Sage recalls how a farmer fixed theirs. Need communication across a split battlefield? The wind itself carries their words. Allies start to rely on the Sage not just for healing, but for solutions. By the end of this level, the Storywood Campfire Sage embodies the old saying, "Every story is useful if you know how to tell it." And in their hands, those stories don't just entertain, they shape the world around them. By the time the Storywood Campfire Sage reaches this stage of their journey, their bond with the world has deepened to something uncanny. They no longer only hear the voices of living plants and animals, now they begin to sense echoes lingering in the world after death. The whisper of a fallen tree still speaks from its stump. The essence of a slain deer might linger near the fire where it's roasted. Even the ashes of a campfire itself seem to carry memory, ready to tell their tale to anyone willing to listen. Mechanically, this evolution is reflected in several powerful new features. First is the druid feat Leshy Familiar Secrets. This choice unlocks new familiar abilities specific to Leshies, dramatically enhancing the Sage's already versatile plant companion. From this point on, their familiar isn't just a leafy mascot, it becomes a reliable support character in its own right. With the addition of abilities like Verdant Burst, a healing explosion triggered when the familiar falls, Restorative Familiar, and Spell Delivery, the Sage now commands a companion that can stabilize allies, deliver healing or offensive magic, and even becomes a tactical tool in the middle of combat. Thematically, this represents the Sages learning to share their story with their familiar, allowing the little Leshy to play an active role in the narrative. The Campfire Chronicler archetype expands here as well, granting the feat the Dead Tell Tales. This choice feels almost eerie. It allows the Sage to resist damage from haunting forces while also communing with the memories of those who have passed. In practical terms, it means more information gathering opportunities, more resilience, and a unique playstyle very few builds can claim. Around the campfire, this can manifest as the Sage drawing out the tale of a fallen soldier, letting the party hear crucial details about a battlefield or dungeon they would never have known otherwise. On the skill side, the Sage selects Spirit Speaker. This feat grants the ability to gather information directly from nature spirits, a natural extension of their role as a traveling folklorist. In play, Spirit Speaker can solve mysteries, uncover clues, or add dramatic flavor to roleplay scenes. Combined with dubious knowledge from level 2, The Sage has two different avenues for pulling information from unreliable or unusual sources, again reinforcing the motive that all stories matter, even when imperfect. The spell repertoire also deepens with the addition of Fungal Infestation. This primal spell turns a fallen foe into a fungal hazard, spreading spores that can harm nearby enemies. It's a darker side of plant magic, contrasting sharply with healing blossoms and food conjuration. In narrative terms, it represents the Sage grappling with the full cycle of nature, not just life and growth, but death and decay. Mechanically, it adds battlefield control and damage, boosting their blaster and controller rolls in the 3Q rubric. A fight where the Sage drops an enemy and mushrooms burst from the corpse to choke their allies is a fight no one forgets. Alternative options could have been taken here. Hobnobbler is a classic skill feat for gathering information from townsfolk, and it's strong, but Spirit Speaker is far more on theme at this stage. The Sage doesn't lean on tavern rumors, they coax knowledge directly from the land and the spirits. Likewise, other damage-dealing spells could have been chosen, but Fungal Infestation captures the eerie side of druidic lore in a way that perfectly complements the Campfire Chronicler's ability to commune with the dead. Cinematically, imagine the party roasting a freshly hunted stag over the flames. As the fire crackles, the Sage closes their eyes and begins to speak. Not just about the hunt, but in the very voice of the animal. I ran through these woods for many a year. I tasted spring water from the brook and clashed antlers with rivals in the clearing. This is my last fire, but may it warm you as the sun once did me. The party grows quiet, listening. Even the fire seems to shift as though the stag's memory is woven into the smoke. Moments later, when enemies attack, the Sage gestures at the fallen foes, causing mushrooms to erupt from the corpses, continuing the cycle of story through death. From a party role perspective, this level adds a great deal. The familiar becomes a true secondary healer and spell support, ensuring the Sage's healer role is not just strong, but also resilient. If the Sage is busy, the Leshy can act in their stead. The Dead Tell Tales and Spirit Speaker expand the solver role, giving them multiple ways to uncover lore or secrets. And Fungal Infestation marks the Sage's first truly dangerous blaster controller spell, broadening their combat toolkit. But perhaps most importantly, this level cements the Sage as someone who thrives on connection through endings. Every death becomes a story, every flame a stage. And around the campfire, allies now look not only for healing and laughter, but also for truth. The hard truths, the painful truths, and the kind that only come when you listen to voices that are gone. By the time the Campfire Sage reaches the 5th year of their life cycle, their roots have spread far beyond their homeland. They are no longer just a wandering druid gathering stories. They've become a weaver of connections, binding together allies, strangers, plants, and spirits alike. Their tales carry authority now. People listen not only because the stories are entertaining, but because they matter. A story told by the Sage often leads to action, healing, or change. Mechanically, level 5 is a key milestone. Attribute boosts further round out the character and strengthen their versatility. Dexterity climbs again, keeping their armor class competitive and reflex save sharp. Intelligence rises, reflecting the growing library of lore and practical knowledge. Charisma receives another bump, bolstering social presence and diplomacy. In Wisdom, the Sage's heart pushes their spellcasting power further. The result is a ghoran who is mechanically well balanced across defenses, skills, and spellcasting, with no true glaring weak spot. On the skill front, diplomacy rises to expert, marking a turning point in their role as the party face. They're no longer simply a plant telling amusing tales. They're a skilled negotiator who can sway hearts and minds with a mixture of charm, sincerity, and wisdom. Around the table, this opens opportunity for the Sage to consistently lead in social encounters. Hunting lore is also added, granting insight into tracking, studying, and recalling knowledge about prey. This isn't just for combat though, it's another way of grounding their storytelling in the cycles of nature. Whether speaking about the habits of a wolf pack or the resilience of a boar, the sage can draw on lived knowledge to give their tales authenticity. For spells, the sage blossoms. Literally. Lotus Walk provides the ability to stride across water, each step blooming with a floating lotus blossom. It's an incredibly thematic spell, transforming travel itself into a stage for storytelling. Imagine the party facing a raging river, only for the sage to walk across serenely, calling back, "The lilies told me once that water carries all burdens. If you walk with faith, they will carry you too." The mechanical benefits here are straightforward, water traversal, but the narrative impact is unforgettable. Equally impactful is Soothing Blossoms, which conjures flower that draws out poisons and diseases while calming the afflicted. For the sage, this is a natural extension of their healing role. No longer are they limited to stabilizing wounds or conjuring food. Now they can counteract sickness and comfort the suffering in a way that feels organic to their plant identity. This pushes their healer role close to its peak, giving them reliable condition removal earlier than many others. The ancestry feat at this level is Ancient Memories, and it deserves special mention. This feat allows the sage to swap out trained skills during daily preparation, granting immense flexibility. Mechanically, it means that depending on the day's adventure, the sage can tailor their skill set, swapping in society for a day in the city, athletics for a trek through the mountains, or thievery if dungeon crawling requires it. Narratively, it represents how stories work. New tales replace old ones, and the sage adapts their knowledge based on what they've most recently learned. No 2 mornings of preparation are the same, and every day feels like a new page in their ever-evolving story. Alternative ancestry feats like Tree's Ward could have been chosen, which grant protective magic, but Ancient Memories wins out here for sheer thematic resonance and mechanical utility. This is one of those choices where optimization and flavor align perfectly. A sage who can adapt their lore daily is both mechanically strong and narratively compelling. Cinematically, the level 5 sage is breathtaking in action. Picture them arriving at a poisoned ally's side, lotuses blooming underfoot as they cross a pond. They kneel, conjuring blossoms that gently pull the sickness from the body, leaving petals behind as a reminder of the healing. Later that evening, by the fire, they retell the event not as a feat of magic, but as a story passed on. "The blossoms whispered their secrets to me. They said suffering is only temporary if you bloom through it." For a party role perspective, this level solidifies their strengths. As a healer, they are near unmatched among druids at this stage, with Stabilize, Healing Plaster, Heal, Soothing Blossoms, and the Leshy Familiar's Verdant Burst, creating a layered kit of death prevention and recovery. As a face, their expert diplomacy and decent charisma mean they're ready to lead in any social situation, while Campfire Chronicler ensures those social moments are rich and memorable. As a support, their battlefield presence grows with blossoms, spirits, and familiars, all providing options to buff and aid allies. Even as a blaster, they hold their own. Pummeling Rubble, Fungal Infestation, and Flora spells give them control tools that complement their supportive role. But most importantly, the sage now embodies their identity, a true campfire leader. They heal wounds, share wisdom, adapt their skills daily, and walk with grace across even the most dangerous paths. At level 5, they are no longer simply the druid with a familiar. They are a traveling storyteller whose very presence makes the world around them bloom. By the time the Storywood Campfire Sage has grown into their 5th level, their role within the party is no longer ambiguous. They are not a frontline bruiser nor a stealthy scout. Instead, they serve as the connective heart of the adventuring group, filling crucial gaps in healing, social presence, and flexible support. To see how they function at the table, we'll break them down through the 3Q rubric: access, uptime, and coverage, scored across all 9 major roles. The end result paints a clear picture. This sage is a healer first, but their branches stretch into several secondary spaces, making them indispensable. 5-star healer, the sage's strongest role by far. On access, they're already stacked: the heal spell, stabilize cantrip, healing plaster, and the familiar's verdant burst gives them multiple avenues of life-saving magic. That's a full 2 points in access. Uptime is also excellent. Stabilize and Healing Plaster are cantrips, so they can be cast without limit, ensuring the Sage never runs out of tools for out of combat or emergency stabilization. Even if heal is limited by spell slots, the unlimited options keep them effective. That's another 2 points. Coverage earns them 1 point. They're not counteracting every condition yet, but Soothing Blossoms provides early removal of poison and disease, making their healing relevant to more than just hit points. In practice, this means that the Sage is the safety net of the party. When an ally drops, the Sage stabilizes them instantly. When an adventuring day drags on long and healing resources would normally be spent, Healing Plaster provides endless recovery. When poison or sickness strikes, blossoms bloom to ease the suffering. Few parties will ever feel unsafe with the Campfire Sage at their side. 4-star Face. Though built as a druid, the Sage is almost bard-like in their ability to engage socially. With diplomacy at expert rank, charisma boosted, and Campfire Chronicler providing thematic tools, they stand out as the party storyteller and negotiator. Around a noble's banquet table, or in front of a suspicious village council, the Sage can step forward and turn the moment into a campfire conversation. Mechanically, they don't have every social skill. Intimidation and deception are weak, but their strength and diplomacy carry most encounters. They're not just rolling dice, they're weaving stories, which often win points with GMs and NPCs alike. That breadth earns them their 4 out of 6 stars, firmly establishing them as a reliable face whenever needed. 3-star Support. The Sage provides more than healing. They enhance allies through battlefield magic and narrative positioning. Helpful Wood Spirits is a early standout, adding utility and aid that keeps teammates effective. Spells like Voice on the Breeze give communication and coordination advantages, while the Familiar's Ambassador ability even bolsters social support. This isn't a constant buffing of a bard, but it's steady enough to score 3 stars. Strong support when the right moments arise. 3-star Blaster. Druids aren't just healers, their spell list carries teeth. By level 5, the Sage has access to Pummeling Rubble for multi-target damage and Fungal Infestation for battlefield denial. They're not blasting every round, but for when the situation calls for it, they can punish clustered foes and control space with thematic plant-driven magic. That earns a solid 3 stars. Not a primary role, but a dependable backup option. 2-star Solver. Between untrained improvisation and ancient memories, the Sage can meaningfully contribute to just about any skill-based challenge. They aren't the party's top investigator or puzzle solver, but they're rarely sidelined. Need knowledge on monsters? Expert Natured covers it. Need a one-day thievery or society boost? Ancient Memory slots it in. Combined with dubious knowledge, they can provide entertainingly flawed but still helpful information. This earns 2 stars, a flexible but not dominant problem solver. Some roles are simply not on the table for the Sage. As a defender, the Sage has no tools for protecting allies through armor, shields, or positioning, so that remains at 0 stars. As a striker, their single target damage is minimal compared to martial classes, leaving them at 0 stars there as well. As a scout, they don't excel in stealth, traps, or recon. The Leshy Familiar can help, but not enough to raise the score past 0 stars. Taken together, the Sage's ratings tell a story of balance and versatility. In mechanical terms, they carry the party's healing role, almost entirely, preventing wipes and sustaining allies through unlimited out-of-combat healing. In narrative terms, they anchor the group's social interactions and exploration scenes with constant adaptability and storytelling. They may not strike the killing blow or shield the front line, but they make sure every other role functions at its best. In play, this balance means the Campfire Sage never overshadows their companions, but they are always essential. The fighter swings harder because the Sage keeps them standing. The rogue negotiates more confidently because the Sage's tail set the stage. The wizard feels freer to burn big spells because they know the Sage can patch the party up afterwards. This is the beauty of the build. It's not just a druid with healing. It's a narrative engine that makes every other party member shine brighter. At this point in their journey, the Storywood Campfire Sage bond with nature deepens once again. They've always been able to commune with plants to coax blossoms into bloom or draw whispers from tree roots. But now that connection expands to a new form: companionship. The sage meets a young arboreal sapling, a creature part guardian, part child, and part story waiting to be told. Where the leshy familiar embodies small wisdom and day-to-day assistance, this sapling companion represents growth, strength, and the living embodiment of the sage's role as a guide. Together, the three, druid, familiar, and companion, form a miniature traveling community, mirroring the fellowship of the larger party. Mechanically, this new bond comes from the feat Order Explorer, Animal Order. By stepping beyond their original leaf order, the sage adapts aspects of the animal order, gaining an animal companion. Their choice of young arboreal sapling is both thematically and mechanically flexible. Narratively, it ties the sage's plant heritage to a walking symbol of forest guardianship. Mechanically, it gives them a companion that can provide both battlefield presence and roleplay flavor. The sapling is sturdy, capable of supporting the sage in combat when needed, but can also retreat into the background during less martial moments, reinforcing the idea that this companion is a narrative extension of the sage's story. Alongside this new ally, the Campfire Chronicler archetype expands with illuminating stories. This ability adds bonuses to recall knowledge, but not in a vacuum. It requires the sage to share a story. Mechanically, this provides tangible recall boosts for themselves or allies, which can be decisive in combat when identifying a monster's weaknesses. Thematically, it turns every recall moment into an opportunity for roleplay. Imagine the sage calling out across the battlefield. "I once heard from a shepherd that these beasts hate the taste of iron. Strike with your blades and they'll falter." The effect is real. Better knowledge, better rolls, smarter combat decisions, but it feels like a tale woven into the party's shared story. This is one of those archetype features that seems small on paper, but at the table it transforms gameplay into storytelling. For skills, the sage broadens their ability to gather information with Hobnobber. This feat allows them to quickly gather rumors and details from local communities. Combined with their diplomacy and growing reputation as a campfire storyteller, this makes them incredibly effective in towns, cities, or villages. If the party wants to know what's happening, the sage doesn't have to roll a check, they weave themselves into the community, trading stories for truth. It's another way that they serve as the connective tissue between the adventuring heroes and the wider world. Spellcasting takes a leap here as well. At 3rd rank, the sage gains access to Haste, a spell that epitomizes action economy. Mechanically, Haste allows an ally to act faster, moving, striking, or interacting with increased efficiency. Narratively, this ties beautifully into the sage's theme. Their stories inspire action. Around the campfire, words spark memory and drive. On the battlefield, those same words fuel speed and precision. Imagine the sage calling out, "Remember the tale of the rabbit and the fox? Run swifter, strike first." Suddenly, an ally moves with renewed vigor, striking twice while an enemy struggles to keep up. Alternative options were considered here. The skill feat Arcane Sense could have provided Detect Magic, giving the sage a broader utility suite, but ultimately, Hobnobber won out because it ties directly into the theme. This build isn't about raw mechanical optimization, it's about creating a character who is always collecting, sharing, and spreading stories. Gathering information from people, as well as plants and spirits, completes the trifecta of knowledge sources. Cinematically, level 6 often plays out as the moment the sage's small circle of companions begins to resemble a family. Picture the party stopping by a clearing at night. The sage sits by the fire, telling the story, while the leshy familiar sits on their shoulder, and the young arboreal sapling leans against the edge of the firelight, branches swaying as though listening. When danger comes, the sapling lumbers forward, defending the group with newfound strength, while the sage inspires allies with a shouted tale that sharpens their strikes. From a party role perspective, this level pushes the sage further into support. Illuminating stories enhances recall knowledge, ensuring that the whole team fights smarter. Haste is one of the best support spells in the game, directly amplifying allies' effectiveness. Hobnobber strengthens their ability to solve social or narrative challenges, and the Arboreal Sapling adds flexible utility, combat presence when needed, roleplay color when not. Altogether, level 6 marks a turning point. The Storywood Campfire Sage is no longer a lone wanderer. They are now the heart of a small traveling community, with companions both plant and animal, and stories that actively shape the battlefield. By now, the Campfire Sage has grown beyond being just a storyteller and a healer. They're becoming a force of nature in their own right. Their bond with the world is deeper, their magic more potent, and their ability to sustain allies greater than ever before. This stage of the journey feels like the moment when the Sage stops simply being a wandering collector of tales and starts becoming a keeper of legends. Their stories don't just inform or comfort anymore, they carry power, shaping the flow of battle and the endurance of their party. Mechanically, the biggest leap here comes from advancing nature to master proficiency. This is no small step. By this level, the Sage isn't just competent, they're among the best in the world at understanding and interpreting the natural order. In play, this translates to several key advantages. Recall knowledge checks about natural creatures and phenomena are almost guaranteed successes, nature-based exploration tasks become trivial, and spell attack rolls and DCs tied to primal spells become more formidable. In short, the Sage's identity as a druid is solidified. They are no longer a novice learning from trees, but a true master whose voice carries the authority of the natural world. For their general feat, the Sage selects Fast Recovery, a feature all about endurance and resilience. Rules-wise, this feature doubles the hit points they regain from resting, accelerates recovery from ongoing poisons and diseases, reducing stages by 2 on a success or 3 on a critical, and helps them recover from the drained condition twice as quickly. In practice, this makes the Sage far sturdier over the long haul. Diseases and poisons that might sideline another adventurer are worn down overnight. Persistent afflictions fade faster, and the Sage wakes up with more vitality than ever expected. Narratively, the Sage's nightly rituals of herbal teas, quiet stories, and restorative glow around the campfire create an atmosphere where even the worst days can be left behind by dawn. This feat synergizes beautifully with Healing Plaster and Soothing Blossoms, rounding out the Sage's endurance profile without relying solely on active combat healing. Spellcasting reaches a new tier at this level with 4th rank spells, and the Sage's choices here embody their dual identity: utility and offense. First is Bridge of Vines, a quintessential utility spell. With it, the Sage can conjure a living bridge of twisting greenery, creating paths across otherwise impassable gaps. Mechanically, this is a huge boon for exploration and mobility, letting the party bypass obstacles without spending resources or risking lives. Narratively, it reinforces the Sage's role as a guide. When the path ends, the Sage makes a new one. Around the table, this often turns a potentially frustrating obstacle into a memorable moment of druidic ingenuity. The second spell, Murderous Vine, is the darker counterbalance. Where Bridge of Vines open paths, Murderous Vine closes them, wrapping enemies in constricting tendrils, resisting their movement, and dealing damage. It's a powerful battlefield control option that adds weight to the Sage's blaster and controller rules. Mechanically, it helps lock down dangerous foes, freeing allies to focus elsewhere. Thematically, it reminds everyone that the Force is not only nurturing, but also deadly, and the Sage commands both of those aspects. Alternative feat options were considered here, most notably Toughness, which increases hit points and helps with survivability. Most druids, and players in general, prioritize Toughness by this point, but the Sage chose Fast Recovery instead, leaning into their campfire motif. While Toughness makes them harder to kill, Fast Recovery makes them harder to wear down, and that's more in line with the Sage's identity as someone who sustains and helps uplift. Cinematically, level 7 is when the Sage feels truly awe-inspiring in action. Imagine the party pressed against a ravine, enemies closing in. With a calm voice, the Sage tells the story of vines that once held a mountain together. As the tale ends, vines sprout across the chasm, weaving a living bridge that the party dashes across. Later, in the same battlefield, the enemies attempt to follow. The sage raises a hand and snarling vines lash out, wrapping and crushing the pursuers in place. One story creates escape, another ensures survival. From a party role perspective, this level enhances several scores. As a healer, the sage grows more efficient. Fast recovery ensures they bounce back from attrition faster. As support, Bridge of Vines gives them unmatched exploration and mobility tools, ensuring that the party can always move forward. As a controller or blaster, Murderous Vine provides meaningful battlefield presence, letting the sage dictate enemy movement and deal steady damage. But perhaps most importantly, this level cements the sage as a master of narrative balance. Every choice at this stage reinforces the theme. One hand offers rest and restoration, while the other wields a vine that crush and restrain. Around the campfire, allies begin to realize that their friend isn't just a teller of stories, they're someone whose words and actions are shaping new stories in the moment, and those stories are powerful indeed. By this point in their journey, the Campfire Sage has told countless stories. Tales of villages and forests, victories and defeats, spirits and mortals, but now something shifts. The act of listening and retelling no longer feels like mere preservation of memory. Instead, it begins to resonate with a deeper, almost divine cadence. The sage discovers that stories themselves hold power beyond the mortal world, carrying echoes of truths and mysteries that brush up against the divine. While they sit at the fire and listen, it is no longer only people or plants who answer, it's something greater, a chorus of wisdom flowing through the act of storytelling itself. Mechanically, this growth is represented through a suite of feats that anchor the sage more firmly in both druidic endurance and archetypical storytelling. On the druid side, they select Floral Restoration, a class feat that blends healing and resource management. This ability allows the sage to draw upon the life energy of plants to restore both hit points and focus points. Mechanically, this means the sage can stay in the fight longer, sustaining their focus spell rotation without running dry. Narratively, it's the perfect expression of their bond with nature. Battered and bruised in combat, they kneel and call upon the blossoms around them. Vines and petals curl inward, providing restorative energy onto their body as if the forest itself was tending to them. From the Campfire Chronicler archetype comes Listener's Boon. This feat ties directly into the act of storytelling. When the sage tells or listens to tales, they can refocus more efficiently, gaining renewed connection with their powers. It also grants access to the Knowledge Domain spell, in this case, Scholarly Recollection. This spell provides a significant buff to recall knowledge, turning every story into a mechanical advantage. Picture it, the sage leans into the firelight, recounting a half-forgotten tale of an ancient serpent cult, and the story finishes, they suddenly remember a crucial detail, mechanically represented by the improved roll. This transforms refocusing into an in-character activity, aligning the game's mechanics with the build's narrative in an elegant way. On the skill side, the sage takes Consult the Spirits. This feat deepens their connection to leshies and other nature spirits, allowing them to call upon spectral guides for insight. Mechanically, it's another tool for gathering information. Narratively, it's an expansion of the sage's role as a folklorist. The spirits themselves begin to join the circle of voices. Around the campfire, this might appear as faint whispers in the smoke or shadowy shapes flickering in the flames. Where once they relied on rumor and living plants, now the very essence of nature's spirits join the conversation. Their spell repertoire also expands in a way that reflects their new divine touched role. At 4th rank, they gain Luring Wail, a haunting call that draws foes into danger. It's equal parts battlefield control and eerie folklore, a voice in the night that compels enemies to move against their better judgment. Paired with their familiar and sapling companion, this spell lets the sage dictate the battlefield more strongly than ever before. Meanwhile, the new focus spell, Scholarly Recollection, reinforces the storytelling core. Mechanically powerful, narratively perfect. Alternative options were available here. Additional lore is a skill feat that would have expanded their breadth of trained to knowledge, and it's mechanically solid. But Consult the Spirits is more evocative and unique, tying the build closer to its central themes. Similarly, other combat-focused feats could have expanded damage or defenses, but Floral Restoration and Listener's Boon keep the character rooted in their identity as a healer, supporter, and storyteller. Cinematically, level 8 is when the Sage begins to feel almost priest-like in their presence. Imagine them staggering in battle. Wounds heavy, allies struggling, they place a hand on the ground, and green light radiates upwards as blossoms bloom around them, healing their body and refreshing their spirit. Then, as the fight resumes, they tell a brief story of a forgotten city. The very act of telling the tale focuses their mind, and with a whispered prayer-like cadence, they call out, "I remember, the statues had serpent's eyes." Instantly, the party knows the weakness of their foe, thanks to scholarly recollection. From a party role perspective, level 8 strengthens nearly every category. The Sage's healer role is bolstered by Floral Restoration, ensuring focus-based healing spells don't run out. Their support role grows stronger with Listener's Boon, since stories now directly translate into buffs and refocusing. Their solver role expands with Consult the Spirits and Scholarly Recollection, giving them reliable tools for unlocking information. Even their controller role benefits. Luring Whale adds force movement to their battlefield repertoire. Altogether, level 8 feels like the Sage stepping into a higher calling. Their stories are no longer just about preserving knowledge, they're conduits for divine wisdom and battlefield influence. Every tale told around the fire is both a comfort to allies and a weapon against their foes. By this point, the Storywood Campfire Sage has traveled through countless villages, forests, and forgotten ruins. Every story told has not only deepened their connection to nature, but also honed their ability to navigate the most difficult of human challenges: negotiation. The Sage's charisma has blossomed. Their stories now carry weight beyond entertainment. When they speak, people listen. Not simply because they're curious, but because they feel the truth of the forest in every word. At level 9, the Sage steps into their role as a true diplomat, someone who can prevent battles before they begin or turn enemies into allies with nothing more than a tail and a steady gaze. Mechanically, this is represented by raising diplomacy to master proficiency. This progression is huge for the Sage's face role. They were already competent at persuading and guiding others, but now they're among the best in the world. Master rank means nearly every social encounter leans in their favor. Calming tempers, negotiating treaties, or inspiring the common folk with legends of past heroes. It also enables skill feats at higher tiers later, ensuring their social toolkit will continue to grow. For their ancestry feat, the Sage selects Solar Rejuvenation. This is more than just mechanics. It's the perfect thematic marriage of the ghoran ancestry and the campfire motif. Rules-wise, Solar Rejuvenation grants free healing whenever they rest outdoors without requiring checks. This means every adventuring day in the wilderness is less taxing, and long journeys are easier to endure. Narratively, it feels like the Sage has learned to draw healing directly from the sun, letting its warmth restore vitality during every night's rest. When paired with the nightly firelight, this creates a near sacred image, a ghoran who channels both sun and flame, ensuring the party wakes refreshed. Spellcasting takes another dramatic leap at this level with 5th rank spells, and the Sage's selections reflect their new diplomatic and protective focus. Glimmer of Charm is the showpiece, an enchantment that lets the Sage sway foes mid-conflict, turning a clash into a conversation, or at least buying some breathing room. Balanced against that is Entwined Roots, a 1-minute cast, 10-minute duration party buff that wreaths up to 5 willing creatures in flexible wooden armor. Each protected ally gains resistance 5 to bludgeoning and piercing. When a ranged weapon attack misses or deals 0 damage thanks to that resistance, The roots snatch and hold the ammunition or thrown weapon, which the ally can then reclaim with an interact action. In practice, this is a superb anti-archer tech and general physical mitigation you can cast before an ambush, siege, or parley that might turn ugly. Narratively, it's perfect. The Sage's story literally binds the party together in living wood, words for minds, roots for bodies. Alternative options were considered here, particularly the Ancestry feat Grow Tool, which provides utility by conjuring natural implements. While charming in its own right, it just pales to Solar Rejuvenation's sheer endurance value. By this point in the game, staying power matters more than novelty, and free healing outdoors is always relevant for a party that spends much of its time journeying between towns in the wilderness. Cinematically, level 9 is when the Sage feels like a true leader of the people. Imagine a tense standoff between the party and a group of mercenaries. Weapons are drawn, blood is about to spill, until the Sage steps forward. "I once told this very story at another fire," they begin, voice soft but steady. "There was a mercenary company, fierce and proud, who put down their arms not because they were weak, but because they realized they'd been fighting the wrong battle the entire time." As the Sage's word wrap around them, the mercenaries falter. A soft green glow flickers in the Sage's eyes as the enchantment of Glimmer of Charm takes hold. Suddenly, the fight just doesn't seem worth it, and the battle dissolves into conversation. Meanwhile, arrows whistle from the tree line. The Sage's allies flinch until entwined roots absorbs the shaft, snapping them into harmless splinters. One ally plucks a lodged arrow free, holding it like a trophy, grinning at the protection of living wood. From a party role perspective, level 9 locks in the Sage's identity as a face and support specialist. Their diplomacy is nearly unmatched, allowing them to carry negotiations, parley mid-battle, or inspire communities. Their endurance is incredible. Solar Rejuvenation means every outdoor rest restores vitality without resource expenditure, stacking beautifully with fast recovery from level 7. Their spell list adds battlefield flexibility, charming minds with diplomacy magic, defending allies with nature's roots. The campfire motif also matures here. Where once the fire was a place of comfort, now it feels like a court of its own. Enemies and allies alike sit in its glow, listening to the Sage's word, finding themselves changed by the experience. By level 9, the Sage isn't just a healer or a storyteller, they're a diplomat of nature. Someone whose stories can alter hearts, shift minds, and dictate the outcome of battles before the first blow is ever struck. Halfway through their 20-year life cycle, the Storywood Campfire Sage reaches a moment of reflection. They are no longer a sprouting wanderer collecting tales, they are a seasoned keeper of stories, with companions of leaf and branch beside them, and allies who rely on their wisdom and magic. At this stage, their power doesn't just grow in numbers, it matures in tone. Every tale carries gravitas. Every action, whether in battle or around the campfire, feels like part of a larger legend that is slowly taking shape. Mechanically, level 10 is a keystone. Attribute boosts ensure the Sage's foundation remains strong across multiple roles. Dexterity climbs, keeping their defenses sharp. Constitution grows, bolstering their staying power. Wisdom, already high, rises further, reinforcing spell DCs, attack rolls, and perception. Every aspect of druidic magic becomes more reliable. Finally, charisma increases, making their role as a storyteller and negotiator even more potent. These 4 boosts together underline what the Sage has been all along: balanced, resilient, and versatile, with no true glaring weakness. The druid feat of choice here is Side by Side, which emphasizes teamwork with their arboreal sapling companion. Mechanically, this feat ensures that enemies flanked by both the Sage and their sapling become off guard, opening them to allies' attacks. In play, it's a simple but powerful tactical option. The Sage is no longer standing apart from battle, but stepping into it shoulder to shoulder with their companion. Narratively, it represents the Sage's growing bond with their arboreal ally. No longer a sapling tagging along, but a trusted partner fighting in harmony. Around the table, this feels like the payoff for the narrative setup back at level 6. From the Campfire Chronicler archetype comes the Tales of the Road, another feat that transforms downtime and storytelling into mechanical utility. This choice grants bonuses to recall knowledge about cities, an unusual but highly thematic advantage for a character who has spent years wandering through them. Paired with ancient memories, the Sage can swap in trained skills to match the situation and then apply Tales of the Road for even greater accuracy. Mechanically, this gives them an edge in urban exploration and social encounters. Narratively, it means that every city visited becomes another story woven into the Sage's memory, ready to be recalled at a moment's notice. On the skill side, the Sage selects Influence Nature, a feat that allows them to gain assistance from the environment itself. In play, this feels wonderfully thematic. The Sage doesn't just ask people or spirits for help, but they call on the trees, rivers, and even the skies to lend their voice. Mechanically, it's a strong exploration and support option, broadening the Sage's already vast toolkit for solving problems. At 5th rank, spellcasting expands once more, and the Sage chooses Speak with Stones. This spell epitomizes the build's theme. Mechanically, it lets the caster question natural stone about what it has seen or felt, offering insights into recent event, passages, or history. Narratively, it's perfect for a character whose identity is built around gathering stories. The Sage doesn't just learn from people, plants, and spirits, they now gather the tales of the very earth itself. When they place their hand on a weathered wall or ancient monolith, the stones whisper back stories of travelers, battles, or secrets etched into the land. Alternative options weren't seriously considered here because every feat and spell choice aligns seamlessly with the build's concept. Side by Side continues the theme of fellowship, Tales of the Road ties directly into storytelling, Influence Nature expands our connections to the natural world, and Speak with Stones is as on theme as it gets. This level feels like a carefully orchestrated harmony of mechanics and narrative. Cinematically, imagine the Sage returning to a city they visited years ago. The walls have changed, faces are different, but the stones remember. Placing a hand on the gate, the Sage closes their eyes and whispers a story to the party. The stones say many feet passed here, merchants, soldiers, wanderers like us. They saw a cloaked figure 3 nights ago, slipping through after sundown. If we wish to know who to speak to, we'll find our answers in the tavern down the east road. In battle, the Sage and their arboreal sapling stand side by side, weaving through foes. The Sage shouts encouragement as the sapling lashes out, forcing enemies off balance and leaving them open to ally strikes. Outside of combat, their campfire tales draw from not just people and spirits, but the land itself. Cities, ruins, and mountains, all contributing to their ever-growing tapestry of stories. From a party role perspective, level 10 solidifies the Sage as a true hybrid of face, support, and healer with strong splashes of solver. Side by Side enhances combat contribution, making them more than just a passive supporter. Tales of the Road and Influence Nature broaden their exploration and narrative dominance, ensuring they're never without a tool for problem solving. Speak with Stones reinforces both solver and face as it turns interactions with environments into storytelling opportunities that directly inform decisions. Halfway through their life, the Storywood Campfire Sage stands at the height of versatility. They heal, protect, inspire, negotiate, and even strike when needed. And through it all, they keep telling stories. Not just of the people they've met, but of the very world beneath their feet. By the midpoint of their journey, the Storywood Campfire Sage has blossomed into far more than a healer or storyteller. Between their expanding spell list, new archetype features, and the arrival of their arboreal sapling companion, their role in the party evolves significantly. The 3Q rubric, access, uptime, and coverage, shows how their support role has grown dominant while others have shifted, sometimes up, sometimes down. Let's break down the numbers and what they mean in play. The Support Crown. Support becomes the Sage's signature role at this stage, scoring 5 out of 6 stars. The rubric highlights multiple factors. Team-wide bonuses, 2, 2, and 2. The Sage's kit now includes Entwined Roots for team resistance, Bridge of Vines for mobility, and Haste to supercharge allies. These tools offer direct, wide-reaching benefits that affect the whole group, not just one character. Defensive boons, 2, 2, and 2. Entwined Roots is the standout here, layering physical resistances across allies. Combined with solar rejuvenation and fast recovery, the Sage ensures that the party recovers quickly between encounters and is harder to wear down. Uptime / radius, 2, 2, and 2. Long duration buffs like Entwined Roots or story-driven recall knowledge boosts from illuminating stories keep the support flowing beyond one fight. These aren't short bursts, they're advantages that shape entire adventuring days. Action economy 100. The only limitation is our action economy. Many of our best support tools take a minute to set up or eat valuable actions mid-fight. But even here, Haste balances things out by giving allies more actions to spend. Stacking friendliness 1, 1, and 1. Their buffs rarely overlap with other party support, so their benefits stack cleanly enough with what a bard, cleric, or champion might bring to the table. In practice, this means that by level 10, the Sage is a true force multiplier. They aren't just healing wounds, they're creating opportunities, enhancing allies, and layering durability so the group can take on threats that would otherwise overwhelm them. Healer. Healing, once their undisputed strength, has settled into a 4-star role. They still carry powerful tools, Soothing Blossoms for condition removal, Healing Plaster for unlimited sustain, and the Leshy Familiar's Verdant Burst for emergency stabilization. But compared to a dedicated healer like a Life Oracle or a Cleric, their active healing pool is smaller. Floral Restoration helps keep focus spells online, but as spell slots expand, their kit leans more towards support than pure healing. That being said, the Sage is still incredibly reliable in this role, with fast recovery and solar rejuvenation ensuring quick recovery outside of combat, and the multiple safety nets inside combat. The party never truly lacks healing. The shift isn't a weakness, it's a natural rebalancing of their toolkit. Face. Diplomacy rising to master rank cements the Sage's role as a 4-star face. With skill feats like Hobnobber and features like illuminating stories, they can gather information, sway NPCs, and shift hostile encounters into negotiations. Glimmer of Charm makes this magical as well. Words themselves become weapons and shields, ending fights before they even begin. At this stage, the Sage isn't just a party face, they can serve as the face. Around the table, whenever negotiation happens, allies will often look to the Sage first. Their stories, charisma, and archetype features combine to make them nearly unbeatable in social encounters. Blaster and Controller. On the offensive side, the Sage sits comfortably at 3 stars in both Blaster and Controller. Their spell choices give them strong, situational, powerful tools. Murderous Vine for battlefield lockdown, Luring Whale for forced movement, and damage control spells like Pummeling Rubble. They don't have the raw destructive force of an Evoker Wizard, but they don't really need it. Their magic restrains, compels, or damages just enough to tip encounters in the party's favor. What makes this particularly fun is how thematic these spells are. When the Sage lashes out, it isn't with fireballs or lightning bolts, it's with vines, whispers, blossoms, and spirits. Every offensive moment feels like the part of the same folkloric tale they've been weaving since level 1. Solver. Solver score climbs up to 3 stars thanks to feats like Consult the Spirits and Tales of the Road, paired with Ancient Memories. The Sage can meaningfully contribute in almost any skill challenge, whether it's deciphering ruins, recalling monster weaknesses, or asking the land itself what it's witnessed. Speak with Stones elevates this even further, turning the environment into a direct source of knowledge. This makes the Sage one of the most reliable fallback options when the party hits a narrative puzzle. They may not be a specialist, but they can always add in a tool or a trick. The rest. Some roles remain marginal. Defender at 1 star thanks to Entwined Roots resistances, Striker at 1 star because of side-by-side flanking synergy with the Arboreal Sapling, and Scout at 1 star, where Hobnobber and Familiar Scouting provide minimal but present utility. None of these are core roles, but they add flavor and flexibility without competing with the party's dedicated specialists. The most fascinating part of this transition is watching how the Sage's identity shifts. At level 5, they were a healer-first character with 5 stars in healing and strong face/support secondary roles. By level 10, healing has dipped slightly, but support has risen to the forefront. This reflects their new toolkit. Entwined Roots, Haste, and Illuminating Stories shape the battlefield and uplift allies more than any one healing spell could. Face has remained consistently strong, climbing with each rank of diplomacy and capped by magical persuasion. Solver has grown from a dabbling improviser to a dependable secondary problem solver. Blaster and Controller have both filled out, offering a wider palette of combat impact. The result is a Sage who isn't just a healer, they're the party's backbone, layering defenses, amplifying actions, and telling stories that literally shape outcomes. They're less about patching wounds now, and more about preventing those wounds from ever landing in the first place. At this stage of their journey, the Storywood Campfire Sage steps into what many consider the peak years of adventuring. They've seen enough of the world to walk into almost any city, village, or forest and feel at home. Their reputation has grown, faces light up when they arrive, as people recall the stories once told by the campfire. For the Sage, this period is less about forging a brand new identity and more about deepening their roots, strengthening bonds with nature, reacquainting with old friends, and finding that the world itself remembers them. Mechanically, the Sage continues expanding on their breadth of knowledge. Plant lore rises to expert proficiency, reflecting not only their mastery of flora, but also their increasing ability to weave that knowledge into practical advice, recall knowledge checks, and roleplay flavor. In combat, this might mean identifying a plant monster's hidden weakness. Out of combat, it could mean recalling what herbs soothe poison, or which vines will bear weight as a rope. Narratively, this change underscores their role as the party's folklorist of the natural world. When the Sage speaks about plants, they speak with authority born of both study and story. For feats, the Sage selects a home in every port, a perfect encapsulation of this life stage. Mechanically, it provides a built-in advantage in settlements. People remember the Sage and welcome them back, and are more inclined to provide shelter, information, or aid. Narratively, it reinforces the character's reputation. The Sage has left a trail of stories behind them, and those stories have left their mark. When they return to a coastal town they visited years ago, the innkeeper greets them warmly, not because of gold, but because of the tale they told long ago that made the whole tavern laugh. This feat brings the Archetypes campfire motif to life. Stories aren't just memories, they're currency. Spellcasting takes a significant step forward here with access to 6th rank spells. The Sage's choices lean heavily into offensive plant magic, reflecting the idea that even the most serene storyteller can call upon nature's fury when needed. Nature's reprisal allows them to command a large swath of plants, causing them to lash out at enemies with thorns and vines. This spell epitomizes battlefield control, slowing, damaging, and poisoning groups of foes while creating zones that enemies hesitate to enter. Paired with Rose's Thorns, a brutal offensive option, the Sage gains the ability to deal high damage when storytelling and support just aren't enough. Together, these spells elevate their blaster and controller roles, giving them a way to dominate the battlefield with raw plant power. Alternative feat choices existed here. Entourage, for example, would have allowed the Sage to rely more heavily on allies in urban spaces, extending their influence in cities. While mechanically solid, it felt less personal than a home in every port. The latter highlights the Sage's unique style, people remembering them, not simply providing aid because of circumstance. In a build all about weaving stories and being remembered, This choice is both mechanically strong and narratively warm. Cinematically, level 11 often shows the Sage at their most commanding in combat. Picture a battlefield overrun with enemy soldiers. The Sage steps forward, eyes narrowing as they lay a hand on the ground. With a resonant chant, the nearby flora surges, roots ripping from the ground to entangle ankles, roses sprouting with thorned vines that whip and lash at foes. Arrows and blades glance aside as nature itself fights back. Its reprisal is a living storm. The party watches as an entire flank of the enemy falters, slowed and bleeding, while the Sage calls out. The forest remembers every cut and fire. It now answers in kind. Meanwhile, outside of combat, the same Sage might walk into a small port town and find familiar faces. Children rush to their side, begging for another story about the dancing leshies. An innkeeper nods knowingly, already pulling out a stool by the fire. This duality, the feared battlefield commander and the beloved storyteller, defines their journey at this level. From a party role perspective, level 11 is a turning point where their support and blaster controller roles share the spotlight. Support remains strong thanks to their narrative feats and archetype features, but blaster climbs with the addition of large-scale plant magic. Healer remains steady but less dominant compared to support, and face benefits indirectly from a home in every port, making them more reliable in urban or social exploration. Altogether, level 11 represents a Sage in full bloom, recognized wherever they go, respected by both nature and people, and commanding enough power to alter the flow of battles. They're not just telling stories anymore, they're writing them into the land itself. By the time the Sage reaches this stage in their life, even the simplest campfire is transformed by their presence. Where once a fire was merely warmth and light, now it has become a vessel for their stories, a hearth infused with primal power. The flames flicker in rhythm with their words, leaning in like listeners, and when danger strikes, the fire itself seems to protect those gathered around it. This is the moment where the Sage's motive of the campfire storyteller shifts from symbolic to literal, with the campfire itself gaining mechanical and narrative weight. Mechanically, the Sage takes primal focus as their class feat. This allows them to fully restore all focus points when refocusing, an enormous upgrade to resource management. It means that their suite of focus spells, from cornucopia to floral restoration, can be used aggressively and consistently without fear of running dry. Where earlier levels required careful rationing of focus powers, now the Sage can unleash them freely, knowing they'll be replenished with a single refocus. For a build centered on storytelling and long adventuring days, this is invaluable. It ensures that their stories as magic remains ever present in both combat and downtime. The free archetype feat at this level is Cozy Campfire, one of the most flavorful and mechanically striking additions to the kit. The Sage spends an hour creating a magical campfire, whispering stories into the flames. Once kindled, the fire sheds light, cannot be extinguished by mundane means, and burns until the next day's preparations. More importantly, it defends its circle. The first time each round a creature within its light attacks, they must roll a will save against the Sage's DC. Depending on the result, their attack might be penalized, disrupted, or negated entirely. Narratively, this feels like the culmination of the archetype's central conceit, the campfire as a protector. The Sage doesn't need to raise a shield, the stories themselves shield their allies. Mechanically, it's a defensive aura that punishes hostile attackers, providing subtle but powerful battlefield control. In play, this creates memorable moments. Enemies hesitate to strike while sitting in the glow, unnerved by the unseen curse woven into the firelight. For their skill feat, the Sage circles back to Entourage, which had been a contender earlier. Now it finds its perfect place. With Entourage, the Sage leverages their social connections to gather help in cities, reinforcing their face and support roles. When combined with a home in every port, this paints a clear picture. Wherever the Sage goes, People remember them, welcome them, and offer aid. Mechanically, this ensures urban adventures are just as rewarding for the Sage as wilderness ones. Narratively, it fits beautifully. The Sage has told so many stories that communities themselves have become almost part of their extended family. Spellcasting adds another iconic choice here, Field of Life. This massive area heal creates a zone where allies recover hit points every round they remained inside. Mechanically, this is a tremendous boost to their healer role, especially in battles of attrition. Narratively, it's perfectly on theme. The Sage's presence transforms a battlefield into a living sanctuary. Blossoms blooming where blood falls, roots knitting wounds as quickly as they're made. Alternative options were on the table here. Garland spell, for example, would have provided extra effects when casting plant or fungus spells, a strong synergy option, but Primal Focus was chosen instead because regaining focus points aligns more directly with the Sage's identity. Stories should never run out, and with this feat, they don't. Cinematically, level 12 offers some of the most striking imagery yet. Picture a late night ambush on the party while they rest. Enemies rush into the firelight, weapons raised, only for the Sage's cozy campfire to flare. The first attacker falters, their strike disrupted as the flame seizes their arm. Another enemy pushes through, but their blade feels heavier, slowed by the whispered curses of the flame. Meanwhile, allies feel strength flowing back into them as the Field of Life blossoms around the campfire, petals drifting through the night air, closing their wounds. The fight becomes not just a skirmish, but a scene, an almost sacred defense of the campfire hearth. From a role perspective, level 12 reinforces the Sage's support dominance. Cozy Campfire adds battlefield defense and crowd control, Field of Life strengthens healing dramatically, and Primal Focus ensures these tools are always available. Their face role grows stronger with Entourage, cementing them as the centerpiece of both social and combat encounters. Altogether, this level marks a turning point where the Sage is no longer simply inspired by their stories. Their campfire, their focus, their very presence now transforms these stories into literal shields and sanctuaries. At level 12, the Sage doesn't just tell stories by the fire listens and then answers. By now, the Storywood Campfire Sage is more than a friendly wanderer and a healer of hearts. Years of journeying, countless tales told, and endless bonds formed have taught them that not every listener comes with goodwill. Some seek to silence stories, to twist them, or to harm the storyteller themselves. At this stage, the Sage accepts a harsher truth. Sometimes, survival means embodying the forest thorns as much as its blossoms. This is when their tales gain an edge of warning. Gentle words backed by the certainty that nature itself will strike back if crossed. Mechanically, this is represented in both skill and ancestry growth. Ghoran lore rises to expert, solidifying their identity as a plant being who not only speaks of nature, but is nature. Their heritage and lived experience become more than background. They now provide mechanical weight in recall knowledge, crafting, and roleplay scenes tied to Ghoran culture and biology. The feat chosen here is Look But Don't Touch, a powerful defensive tool that perfectly matches the flavor of the Ghoran. Mechanically, it means that enemies attempting to grab or strike the Sage risk being poisoned by contact with their thorny, toxin-laced body. Narratively, this represents the Sage's thorns becoming part of their legend. They are no longer simply embraced as a kind figure of light and fire. Now there are whispers told in the same breath. Be careful. They can charm you with words, but touch them at their peril. It transforms the Sage into a balanced figure of attraction and danger, like the forest itself. Beautiful, but unforgiving when threatened. Their spellcasting grows sharper as well with the arrival of 7th rank spells. Here, the Sage selects Pollen Pods and Shock to the System, both of which elevate their combat impact. Pollen Pods unleash clouds of sporific or disrupted spores, hampering enemies and reinforcing their controller role. Shock to the System is the opposite. a raw burst of primal energy that revives allies or devastates foes, reinforcing both their healer and blaster roles. The combination underscores the Sage's duality: restorative in one moment, destructive in the next. Alternative options existed here, notably Endless Memories, which would have built upon Ancient Memories feat selected earlier, granting the ever broader skill versatility. While that choice would have been on theme, it was set aside here in favor of more defensive help. By this stage in a campaign, survivability matters, and Look But Don't Touch ensures that melee-focused enemies think twice before engaging. Cinematically, level 13 is when the Sage feels most like a myth made real. Imagine an enemy soldier rushing towards to grapple them. As soon as their hands close around their bark-like skin, the Sage smiles sadly. The Willow told me once, "Never grasp what you do not understand." A moment later, the attacker staggers back, poisoned, their strength faltering. The Sage turns, raising a hands towards a fallen ally. Lightning arcs from their palms, surging into the ally's body, jolting them back to life, even as it strikes down a nearby foe. The campfire storyteller has become something fiercer, a thorned protector, whose tales of warning come true in flashes of poison and thunder. From a party role perspective, this level represents diversification. The Sage's blaster role strengthens with shock to the system, giving them hard-hitting offense that can also save allies. The controller role expands with pollen pods, which create zones of danger and disruption. Healer remains reliable, boosted indirectly by a shock to the system's revival properties. Meanwhile, Look But Don't Touch adds some defensive bite, reinforcing the idea that they're not just a support. They're dangerous to confront directly. Narratively, allies might begin to see the Sage differently at this point. Where they once were the kind guiding hand around the fire, they are now recognized as a figure of both awe and fear. Their stories comfort, yes, but they also carry warnings, and those who ignore them find themselves poisoned, shocked, or otherwise undone. At level 13, the Sage embodies the forest's truth. Growth and decay, blossom and thorn, comfort and peril, all part of the same story. By this point in their journey, the Storywood Campfire Sage is no longer just a traveler gathering tales. They've become a living archive of folklore, their words carrying the weight of truth, memory, and healing. When they sit before a fire and begin to speak, it is more than a performance. It is restoration. Their companions don't just listen to stories for entertainment. They feel their wounds close, their spirits lift, and even old scars seem lighter. The Sage's campfire has become something sacred, a place where pain turns into wisdom, where memory itself is medicine. Mechanically, the Sage gains access to several feats that reinforce this dual identity as a storyteller and healer. On the druidic side, they select Sow Spell, one of the most versatile tools in their kit so far. Sow Spell allows them to plant spells into the world, triggering them later or applying them creatively in ways most casters can't. Mechanically, this means the Sage can pre-buff allies, prepare defensive magic ahead of time, or turn their battlefield control into delayed, flexible traps. Narratively, it's a perfect fit. They're literally sowing their magic like seeds, letting stories and spells sprout in the right place at the right time. From the Campfire Chronicler archetype comes Stories of Home, one of the most thematic and flavorful feats in the entire progression. This ability allows the Sage's storytelling itself to heal wounds and alleviate conditions. Mechanically, this complements their existing healing suite, ensuring that allies benefit from both magical and narrative recovery. It transforms downtime and even some combat situations into opportunities for the Sage to literally heal by telling tales. Narratively, it means that when an ally sits by their fire, listening to a story from far off lands or forgotten heroes, they feel themselves strengthened. not only in body, but in spirit. This is the heart of the build made manifest, storytelling as salvation. On the skill side, the Sage takes unmistakable lore. This feat ensures that their lore checks cannot critically fail, reflecting the refinement of their storytelling and research. Mechanically, this prevents embarrassing mishaps when relying on lore, ensuring that even a poor roll still provides useful information. Narratively, it reinforces their reliability. Their stories are no longer just anecdotes or guesses. Every tale is derived with enough truth that it always helps, even if it's not entirely accurate. Their companions come to trust their words implicitly, because even when a story is flawed, it carries wisdom. Spellcasting grows yet again here, with another 7th rank spell, and here the Sage makes a deliberate choice: heal. Though they could have chosen another primal spell at this rank, adding heal at this stage ensures they scale with the party's needs. Having relied on lower level heal spell until now, the jump to a 7th rank version massively boosts their burst healing, ensuring they remain competitive with dedicated healers. Mechanically, this choice prevents their healer role from slipping, maintaining parity with their increasingly dominant support role. Narratively, it represents their storytelling becoming so powerful that their words alone can draw allies back from the brink of death, mending wounds with sheer conviction. Alternative options included keeping heal just at the lower tier and choosing a new primal spell. While tempting for variety, the practical reality is that parties at this level need strong burst healing, and the Sage's support identity demanded it. This was less about novelty and more about ensuring that their legend continues to serve the party well. Cinematically, level 14 is when the Sage's stories feel transcendent. Picture a battle where allies are battered, bloodied, and morale is low. The Sage calls for a brief respite, stoking the campfire even in the middle of the chaos. As flames rise, they begin to speak. Not a spell, not an incantation, but a story. Once there was a village that thought itself lost. Its walls were broken, its people scattered. But they gathered by a single fire and told each other stories, not of their ruin, but of their strength. And so they stood together, and the fire burned brighter than the night. As the story ends, wounds knit shut, poisons fade, and allies stand taller. Mechanically, this might be Stories of Home combined with a powerful heal spell. Narratively, it's the perfect example of the Sage's evolution. Their magic is their story, and their story is their magic. From a role perspective, level 14 solidifies the Sage as a 6-star support and a 5-star healer. So spell expands their combat adaptability. Stories of Home ensures their narrative heals as much as their spells, and unmistakable lore locks in their solver reliability. Their blaster and controller roles remain strong thanks to prior spell selections, but it is here at level 14 that their support and healer identities begin to fully merge. They don't just restore health, they restore hope. At this level, the Storywood Campfire Sage isn't simply a character. They've become the heart of any party lucky enough to travel with them. The hearth at the center of every journey, and the storyteller whose words carry the power to heal wounds and shape futures. The Storywood Campfire Sage now stands at the peak of their adventuring power. 3/4 of their life cycle has passed, and with each story told, each bond formed, the weight of their years has begun to settle upon them. This isn't decline, it's culmination. Their magic, their tales, and their reputation have all matured into a living legend. At this stage, the Sage's path bends towards homecoming. They continue to travel and aid others, but every step carries them closer to the forests and the communities that will cradle their next rebirth. Their firelight is no longer just a source of comfort, it's a beacon, visible for miles, marking the place where safety, wisdom, and healing can be found. Mechanically, this point in the ghoran life cycle is marked by another round of attribute boosts. Each one tells a part of the story, Intelligence increases, reflecting the sage's accumulated wisdom from stories, lore, and research. Charisma grows, ensuring their voice remains as captivating as ever, even as age presses on. Dexterity and wisdom both see partial boosts, maintaining the balance of defense and magical potency. Altogether, these boosts don't radically change the sage's profile, they refine it, smoothing out weaknesses and sharpening strengths. At level 15, the sage is a character without glaring flaws, one whose foundation is steady enough to support whatever role the party needs in a given moment. Their skills expand here too. Nature rises to legendary, making them one of the world's foremost authorities on the primal order. No creature, plant, or natural phenomenon escapes their understanding. Mechanically, this means they are among the best in the game at recall knowledge, ensuring that the party always has an edge on preparation. Narratively, it's the final blossoming of their druidic identity. When the sage speaks about nature, they do so with absolute authority, as if the world itself is speaking through them. In addition, they take astronomy lore to trained proficiency. While not mechanically groundbreaking, it's a thematic flourish. The sage has always been a collector of stories, and now they begin to weave the stars themselves into the narrative. Around the campfire, they point to the constellation and tell their tales. How one cluster became a hunter, another a dancing leshy, and the crown upon the forgotten queen. The stars tell their own stories, and the sage listens. For feats, the sage selects toughness. This might seem like a simple choice, but at this stage, survivability matters. Mechanically, toughness adds much needed durability, ensuring that the sage's increased role in combat doesn't come at the cost of frugality. Narratively, it reflects their endurance, the stubborn will to keep walking, keep speaking, and keep guiding others, even as the years weigh heavy. Alternative feats like Incredible Initiative were considered, which would have given them faster turn order presence, but ultimately more hit points and resilience fit the theme better. Spellcasting at this level brings access to 8th rank magic, and the sage's selections are striking. Moment of Renewal is a massive healing spell that restores vitality to allies, removing conditions, and reinvigorating the entire group. This represents the sage's healer role at its absolute peak. When they speak, allies don't just recover from wounds, they are renewed, ready to keep fighting long after exhaustion should have ended them. Paired with this is Burning Blossoms, a devastating offensive spell that bathes the battlefield in fire and flowers. Mechanically, it provides high damage area control, cementing their blaster role. Narratively, it's the perfect expression of their duality, destruction and beauty entwined. The battlefield becomes a burning garden, an image as haunting as it is awe-inspiring. Cinematically, level 15 is when the sage's power feels near mythic. Picture a desperate battle, allies staggering, enemies pressing in. The sage raises their hands and the stars themselves seem to shimmer. Blossoms ignite into flames, scattering across the field, burning enemies where they stand. The fire is terrible, but in its glow, allies breathe easier, their wounds closing, their spirits lifted as if spring itself had returned in an instant. Later, under a quiet sky, the sage points to the constellations, telling their companions of heroes immortalized in the stars. Even the heavens, it seems, now listen to their stories. From a party role perspective, level 15 represents the sage's apex as a hybrid support. Support maxes out at 6 stars, with every facet of the rubric filled. Team-wide bonuses, defensive boons, action economy support, and stacking friendliness. Healing remains 5 stars strong, bolstered by Moment of Renewal, while blaster and controller roles hit new heights thanks to Burning Blossoms and lingering battlefield magic. Face and Solver continue to serve as reliable secondary roles, with Diplomacy lore and Astronomy tying every encounter back to the story. But perhaps the most important development is thematic. At level 15, the sage begins to turn their gaze homeward. They've gathered stories from cities, forests, spirits, and even the stars. Their role as a wanderer nears its natural end. The last 5 years of their cycle will be spent carrying these tales back to their roots, preparing to plant themselves anew. But until then, they shine at their brightest. An unshakable healer, a peerless supporter, and a storyteller whose words burn as fiercely as their blossoms. At this point in their journey, the Storywood Campfire Sage has reached the height of their adventuring years. The campfire that once served as a humble hearth has become a literal bastion of safety. A place where allies heal through story and where even enemies hesitate to strike. Their spellcasting is at its peak, their social reputation well established, and their lore expansive enough to answer almost any question the party faces. The 3Q rubric shows a build that has matured into one of the most versatile and dependable supporters in the game, with nearly every role represented in some capacity. Support. Support has fully blossomed into the Sage's crown role, reaching the maximum 6 stars. Every category of the rubric shrines. Team-wide bonuses 2, 2, and 2. Entwined roots for resistance, Field of Life for aura healing, Haste for extra actions, Stories of Home for restorative storytelling, and Moment of Renewal for mass condition removal, all reinforce that allies function better when they're near the Sage. Action economy grants 2, 2, and 2. Haste provides extra stride or strike actions, Cozy Campfire disrupts hostile actions, and So Spell enables preemptive buffs. These tools consistently free up actions or deny them to foes, shaping encounters round by round. Defensive boons 2, 2, and 2. Solar rejuvenation, toughness, and defensive plant magic create layers of endurance. The Sage not only heals, but prevents damage through resistances and auras. Uptime and radius 2, 2, and 2. Field of Life and Moment of Renewal cover broad areas, ensuring support extends to the whole party, not just one ally. Cozy Campfire maintains presence even during downtime, and many of our buffs last minutes instead of rounds. Stacking friendliness 1, 1, and 1. Their bonuses again rarely overlap with classic support classes like the Bard or Cleric, meaning that the Sage complements rather than competes with other healers or buffers. Mechanically, this means the Sage is always providing something, whether it's the healing blossoms, protective roots, a bonus action, or passive resistances. Narratively, it's the embodiment of their motive, the campfire at the center of the party, where everyone draws their strength. Healer. Healing remains a dominant role at 5 stars. By this stage, the Sage has diversified their healing suite far beyond Healing Plaster and Stabilize. With 7th rank Heal, Field of Life, Soothing Blossoms, and Moment of Renewal, they can keep allies alive through almost anything. Floral Restoration ensures focus powers stay online, and Stories of Home adds narrative healing to downtime and even mid-battle moments. The one piece missing would be specialization. A Life Oracle or medic-focused cleric would still outpace them in raw numbers, but the Sage's breath, curing conditions, stabilizing, burst healing, and sustained area heals makes them almost as reliable. Mechanically, they're more than enough to anchor most parties as the primary healer. Narratively, they aren't just mending wounds, they're renewing faith and weaving hope with every story. Blaster. Offense has surged here, climbing to 4 stars. The Sage now wields powerful battlefield magics like Nature's Reprisal, Rose's Thorns, Burning Blossoms, and Shock to the System. These provide reliable damage across multiple targets and bring plant-themed devastation into combat. While they will never rival a wizard's raw destructive power, their offensive spells always carry secondary effects: damage plus poison, fire plus blossoms, lightning plus revival, that give them staying power as a secondary blaster. This evolution also matches their narrative arc. The Sage isn't a pacifist. When pressed, their stories manifest as storms of blossoms and thunderbolts, reminding foes that even a storyteller can end battles decisively. Controller. Controller also sits at 4 stars, bolstered by spells like Pollen Pods, Murderous Vine, and Luring Whale. These don't just damage, they change positioning, deny movement, or inflict debilitating conditions. Cozy Campfire adds passive disruption by forcing will saves on hostile attackers. In practice, this means the Sage can control how and where battles unfold, even if only indirectly. In play, this often manifests as the Sage shaping the flow of encounters, binding foes with vines, dragging them into hazards, or forcing them to hesitate when striking in firelight. It's narrative control as much as mechanical. Face. Face holds steady at 4 stars, with diplomacy at master proficiency, entourage, and a home in every port. The Sage's presence in cities and villages is unmatched. Glimmer of Charm extends this into combat, turning hostile interactions into social ones. Mechanically, this makes them a contender for first choice for negotiations. Narratively, it cements their legend, the storyteller everyone remembers when they return. Solver. Solver grows here to 4 stars. Legendary nature, expert plant lore, unmistakable lore, tales of the road, and even astronomy lore give the Sage a toolkit broad enough to solve almost any puzzle. Speak with Stones adds environmental insights, while Consult with Spirits ensures nature itself weighs in. Mechanically, this means they're never without answers. Narratively, it turns them into the ultimate folklorist. If they don't know something themselves, they know a story or a spirit that does. The other roles. The Sage isn't built for the front line, but they do contribute a little outside their focus. Defender stays at 1 star, bolstered by Entwined Roots resistances. Strikers earns 1 star thanks to Side by Side with the Arboreal Sapling, which ensures off-guard conditions. Scouts also holds on to 1 star, with the Familiar and Hobnobber providing minimal but thematic exploration support. In character, the Sage has moved from being a healer who tells stories to being a storyteller who heals, protects, and inspires through every tale. Mechanically, healing has remained strong, but has been eclipsed by support as the dominant role. Blaster and controller roles have climbed steadily with plant-themed devastation, while Face and Solver have grown into reliable secondaries. By level 15, the Sage is a complete character. A 6-star supporter, a 5-star healer, and a versatile contributor across many other roles. Narratively, this is the Sage's high point. Their fire now heals, their stories shield, and even the stars above join in their legend. They are no longer just a traveler collecting stories, they are the story, one that allies will remember long after this cycle ends. Though the tale of the Storywood Campfire Sage finds its natural stopping point at level 15, when 3/4 of their life cycle has passed and they begin their journey home, it's tempting to imagine what might come if their story extended its full 20-year span. What if they continued wandering, sharing stories, and growing in power until the very end of their cycle? What might those last 5 levels look like? Mechanically, several powerful class feats shine here. Effortless concentration would let the Sage maintain ongoing spells without spending actions, freeing them to tell new stories while their older magic continues to shape the battlefield. Primal Aegis expands their defenses, representing nature itself from shielding its champion from flame, storm, and stone. Apex Companion would elevate the Arboreal Sapling that has grown beside them into a towering mythic protector, as much part of their legacy as the stories they've told. Archetype feats could fill in any of the missed Campfire Chronicler features, rounding out their storytelling and protective campfire magic. Skill feats at these levels would most likely focus on expanding their lore even further, reflecting the sheer weight of memory and myth they've gathered after 2 decades of travel. Cinematically, imagining the Sage at level 20 is striking. Picture them at the height of their power, blossoms of flame and their life spilling from their hands, their arboreal companion casting a vast shadow, and allies healed simply by resting in their firelight. Their stories no longer just influence, they dictate the flow of the world around them. Even the stars themselves seem to bend closer, eager to hear one last tale before the sage returns to the soil. From a party role perspective, support remains the crowning star, capped at 6 with absurd efficiency. Healing stays strong at 5, controller and blaster both climb further, with face and solver remaining steadfast. In these final levels, nothing is added that changes their identity, only the sharpening of what was already true. The sage is the hearth of the party center, the storyteller whose words shape reality itself. And that brings us to the end of the Storywood Campfire Sage, a ghoran druid, a campfire chronicler, a traveler who's gathered and gave stories until they themselves became the legend. Mechanically, they shine as one of the most versatile supporters in Pathfinder 2e, a 6-star support powerhouse, a reliable 5-star healer, and a capable blaster, controller, face, and solver besides. Narratively, they're unforgettable. A character who embodies what it means to fully live the span of a short life, leaving behind roots, blossoms, and tales that will outlast them. At level 15, the Sage's story comes to its natural close, returning home, preparing to plant themselves anew, and leaving their companions with 1,000 stories to carry forward. But should you choose to walk their road to level 20, you will only find more of the same. More power, more myth, and more stories that bend the very fabric of battle and memory. So whether you play them for 15 levels or all 20, the Campfire Sage is a build that ensures every adventuring day ends the same way it begins. Gathered around a campfire, listening to a story that matters. If this build lit a spark for you, or kept your party alive with a well-timed story by the fire, hit like, so the algorithm knows storytellers deserve some love too. Tell me in the comments what kind of tales your Campfire Sage would collect. Would they be a gentle folklorist passing down village myths, or a wandering myth keeper whose words change the course of battle? If you want more deep dive, role defining, play at your table builds, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next Codex entry. And if this build got you curious to learn the ins and outs of our party rule system, make sure to check out that video right over there. Until next time, control the dice, alt the meta, build the legend. I've been Nicholas, your virtual GM. Thanks for watching.